The brush beyond the canvas. The forest had been quiet all day, a hollow, watching silence that pressed against my ears through the hum of cicadas and the distant caw of a lone raven. By the time I reached the clearing, the sun had already begun its slow bleed behind the ridge of jagged mountains, casting long, skeletal shadows that clawed across the ground. I dropped my pack with a soft thud and exhaled into the crisp evening air, tasting the faint tang of pine resin and wet earth. Alone, I felt the first prickle of unease, that instinctual awareness that the woods are not empty, they simply pretend to be. I set the tent up on a slight rise, the thin nylon stiff in my fingers as I stretched the lines and hammered stakes into the rocky soil. Each sound seemed magnified. The metal strike of the mallet against the tent peg, the snap of nylon cords under tension, the sudden skitter of a small animal fleeing through underbrush. By the time I crawled inside and zipped the flap closed, night had claimed the sky completely. Stars glimmered faintly above the black silhouettes of firs and oaks, a scattering of indifferent lights. I unrolled my sleeping pad and pulled the sleeping bag over myself, the synthetic insulation warm but not enough to chase the chill from my bones. Outside, the wind moved through the branches, a whispering, sighing that filled the gaps of silence. I told myself it was nothing more than the forest breathing, nothing more than shadows shifting on uneven ground. I told myself that until the first brush came. It was faint at first, subtle enough that I thought my mind had conjured it. A slight pressure against the tent's fabric, a whisper of motion along the nylon. My heart thumped sharply, the blood in my ears loud enough to drown out the wind. I pressed my hand against the wall. Smooth, taut nylon. Empty. I swallowed, forcing my breath steady, reminding myself it was probably a branch, a small animal, maybe a raccoon. My rational mind clung to explanations like a lifeline. Then it brushed again, heavier, deliberate, sliding along the tent wall from one end to the other. My stomach clenched. I crawled to the entrance and unzipped the flap an inch. The clearing was empty. Moonlight pooled on the damp earth, illuminating rocks, roots, and pine needles, but no tracks. Nothing had touched the ground. No footprints, no scuff, no disturbed soil. Only the faint echo of the tent wall, still trembling from the unseen contact. I backed into the sleeping bag, heart racing, eyes darting to the shadows outside. Time thickened. Minutes became hours, or perhaps seconds stretched over minutes. Each gust of wind was a step, each rustle in the leaves a whisper, and each brush against the tent wall, impossible and smooth, came again, brushing closer to the flap, to me. I tried to distract myself. I counted trees, traced constellations, whispered to myself the names of long-forgotten childhood pets. The brush came again and again and again. Every time, I opened the flap just a fraction, just enough to see the empty clearing and feel the cold slap of the night air. The forest refused me answers. The absence of tracks gnawed at me, a quiet horror growing in its impossibility. I remembered the lighter in my pocket. I struck it once, the flame sputtering. I held it near the entrance, illuminating the ground in a wavering yellow glow. Shadows leapt and twitched in the firelight. The brush came again, softer this time, almost tentative. I froze, watching the edges of the light, every nerve taut. The clearing remained pristine. No prints, no movement, nothing. I dropped the lighter and it rolled out of reach, guttering in the damp needles, leaving me in absolute black. Sleep was impossible. My eyelids twitched with exhaustion, mind teetering on the edge of something I could not name. Hours, or was it minutes? Passed. The brush became more confident, circling the tent, pressing along seams and poles. Sometimes, I thought I felt the nylon dip slightly under fingers that did not exist. A pattern emerged, a rhythm that was neither random nor natural. Followed me, echoed me, mimicked me. When I shifted, it shifted. When I held my breath, it stilled. When I whispered, it responded. At some point, or perhaps all at once, I realized the brush had a shape. Not entirely human, not entirely animal. Tall enough to loom over the tent when standing on tiptoe, but impossibly narrow, its limbs elongating and contracting in ways that no creature should. It had an intelligence and, worse, a familiarity. There was something in the rhythm, the brush of fabric that whispered recognition. I shook, cold sweat slick on my skin, and remembered a childhood fear long buried. The sense of being watched by someone who knows the exact shape of your life, your smallest habits, your smallest fears. I could not stay inside. I had to see it. I ripped the flap fully open. Moonlight spilled onto the clearing, silvering every branch, every rock. Nothing moved. The forest was silent. And yet, the brush returned, curling around the edges of the tent. A shadow within the shadow, touching nothing but itself. I staggered backward, my hand hitting the nylon again. The brush was behind me now, pressing from within the tent wall. I turned. Empty. I ran. I ran blindly into the forest, leaving pack, tent, and warmth behind. Branches tore at my face. Roots sought to trip me, but nothing followed. Nothing made a sound. I ran until lungs burned and legs threatened to collapse, until the trees began to thin and a dim, gray light, pre-dawn or an impossible twilight, spilled over the horizon. I turned once, heart hammering. The clearing was empty, my camp untouched. Not a single footprint betrayed my flight. And then I saw them, the faint impressions in the wet soil. Hundreds of footprints crisscrossing, overlapping, all impossibly small, but unmistakably human. I bent, reaching toward one, and froze. The print was mine, only mine. From that night forward, every time I close my eyes, I feel it. The brush of nylon on skin that is not skin, a presence that knows the shape of my body better than I do, circling, patient, outside. And sometimes, when the wind shifts just right, I swear I hear it whisper my name. I never camped again. Yet every night, when I shut the tent flap in my mind, I can feel it still brushing against the walls. The one left behind. The fog clung to the trees like a living thing, a pale, writhing mist that pressed against the forest floor and stole the world of color and shape. We had hiked in silence for hours, the only sounds the scuff of boots on moss and the occasional crack of a branch underfoot. Our camp had been set up on a small ridge, where the fog pooled low, and the night had descended like a shroud, smothering even the faintest stars. I woke to the smell of damp earth and pine, and the absence of something. The wind had shifted, or maybe it hadn't, but the air felt colder, heavier. At first, I thought it was a dream, the tugging feeling that gnaws at the edge of consciousness. Then I saw it. A single sneaker, white and mud-stained, lying on its side near the edge of our tent clearing. No foot, no leg, nothing but the shoe. I blinked. The others stirred beside me, groaning and pulling sleeping bags closer. "Where's Matt?" I croaked. My voice sounded foreign in the stillness, too loud, too sharp. The fog seemed to thicken, curling into the corners of my vision. "Matt?" Lena's voice trembled. She sat up, eyes wide, scanning the mist. I thought he was here." I crouched and picked up the shoe. Mud clung to the sole in clumps, but there were no footprints leading away from it. The ground was untouched. It was as if whoever had worn it had vanished mid-step, leaving only the leather and laces behind. A chill ran up my spine. We called his name, voices breaking against the dense fog, but only echoes answered. Or maybe it wasn't echo. The sound carried strangely, bouncing unevenly between trees, elongating some syllables, swallowing others. Each repetition sounded wrong, like someone had imitated us imperfectly, stretching the vowels in ways no human mouth could. "Stay together," I urged, heart hammering. "We need to find him now." We moved as a cluster, boots squelching in the wet moss, flashlights cutting feeble holes through the mist. Every step seemed exaggerated. Our shadows leapt along the trunks in ways that didn't match our movements. Every snapping twig sounded like a footfall, yet when we spun toward the sound, there was nothing, only fog curling over roots and rocks. Then we found the first clue. A scarf, Matt's scarf, wrapped around the branch of a dead oak. It hung like a banner, soaked and dripping. I reached for it, and my fingers brushed a dampness that felt wrong. Not water, not moss, but slick and smooth, like skin. My stomach turned. Lena grabbed my arm. "He wasn't here," she whispered. We pressed on, deeper into the woods, calling, listening, scanning. Each minute stretched impossibly long. Time itself seemed bent, like the fog had warped it, slowed it down. Shadows moved where they shouldn't. The brush quivered, as though something larger lurked behind the trunks, pacing, waiting. Then we heard it. A laugh, faint at first, a childlike trill that slid and warped in pitch. "Matt!" I shouted, voice breaking. Lena clutched my shoulder. The sound came again, but this time closer, just beyond the pool of our flashlight beam. It was off. Too high, too precise, perfect in tone, and yet wrong. We ran toward it, stumbling over roots, mud spraying from our boots. The fog churned ahead, thickening into a wall, and there he was. Or rather, something was there. It had his shape, his height, his jacket, but the face was wrong. The features were almost exact, like a distorted mirror image, but the eyes reflected nothing human, blank and wide. When it laughed, it wasn't Matt. It mocked him. "Matt!" Lena shrieked. I reached for it, and it darted sideways, faster than any man could move. The brush rustled where it should not have, and then it vanished into the fog. No footprints, no trace, only the sound of our own ragged breathing, distorted now, echoing back to us like a cruel joke. We stumbled back to the ridge, desperate, calling, searching. But the clearing was empty, the tent untouched. The single sneaker remained, sole pressed slightly into the mud, facing the trees as if pointing toward something. Or someone. Hours or maybe minutes passed. The fog never lifted. When the sun finally threatened to edge the horizon, we had found nothing. No sign of Matt, only the unnerving traces of his absence. The scarf on the branch, the shoe on the ground, the echo of laughter that seemed to follow every step we took. We left the forest the way we came, silent, eyes darting to every shadow, ears straining for the faintest distortion of sound. I couldn't shake the feeling that it had been watching us all along, learning, mimicking, waiting, that something had stepped into Matt's shape and learned how he breathed, how he moved, how he laughed. I haven't spoken of it since. I can't. Even now, sometimes when I walk down empty streets or past strangers, I catch glimpses of him, or something that looks like him, just beyond my peripheral vision. And I know the truth, the thing my mind refuses to accept. It wasn't Matt who was taken. It was only ever pretending to be him. And the next time we camp, the forest will remember his shape and mine.